Hey guys, Brian Henny here, and yesterday the Democrats and the Republicans both had their primary elections in the state of Wisconsin, so let's take a look at the results. So as you probably already know and can see from those results, both Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz, as I predicted to give myself some credit on this, won their respective primaries as I predicted. They did not win by the margins that I predicted, but it was fairly close. I predicted that Cruz would have about a 5 to 10% win. He ended up, and actually I expected, if anything, it would be closer than that rather than a larger lead than that. He actually did just over 13%. So that's better than I expected him to do. I thought he was going to get closer to the 5 to 10 range, maybe even less. I thought that one could have been closer than the polls indicated, as I said, based on the fact that it was an open primary, but he did actually exceed the polling, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, but it happened. He got the vast majority of the delegates, and I didn't say yesterday, or 2 days ago actually, that Wisconsin for the Republicans was a winner-take-most. I knew it wasn't a winner-take-all, and I had read that it was winner-take-most, but it kind of like the explanation of what exactly that meant, and that wasn't great, so I wasn't going to say it because I wasn't confident that I knew exactly how that worked. It turns out that he got the vast majority just by getting a 13% win. He got 36 of Wisconsin's 42 delegates, with Donald Trump only getting 6, so that was actually a much bigger win in terms of delegates than I expected him to get. I was expecting him to win by a few, but I didn't think he was going to win by 30. And the thing, to me, as a Bernie Sanders supporter, that's a bit frustrating, is you go from that, where Ted Cruz won by 13.1% and got 36 delegates, to Donald Trump's 6. And then on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders won by 13.5%, a larger victory than Ted Cruz, but only got about 10 more delegates. So in that one, they have it at 47 to 36 in terms of delegates for Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton, respectively. But I read somewhere else that it's actually, it'll end up being about 48 to 38. That'll be the total. There are 86 total delegates on the Democratic side in terms of pledged delegates. And then when you factor in the unpledged delegates, eventually they don't vote yet, but that could end up practically evening out because Hillary Clinton has done so well with superdelegates. So as a Bernie Sanders supporter, that's a bit frustrating. It's a bit bittersweet to see that he exceeded expectations. Didn't really exceed my expectations because I had him, I believe I predicted him to win by about 15 to 20, so I was close, 1.5% off. But he still did well. He still exceeded the polls. Unfortunately, that didn't exactly correlate with a big win in delegates. It was a double-digit win even in delegates. He got about 10 more, but I was hoping for it to be a little bit bigger than that. I guess on each side, for the Republicans, as I said, Ted Cruz won. John Kasich was irrelevant, like I predicted. That was a pretty easy prediction. I don't think anyone really expected him to be competitive, because there was only one poll. It was a large poll, but there was only one poll nonetheless that had him even being competitive. Everybody else had him around low 20s, high teens. He couldn't even get that threshold. He only got about 14%. So that's not totally surprising, but it's even less than I expected from him, and he's looking more and more irrelevant. However, Ted Cruz, this does not mean that he has momentum. I wouldn't say. He did win, and it was a bigger win than I expected. I think this makes it a much more contentious fight between him and Donald Trump, and it does give him more leverage for if they get to a contested convention. However, I wouldn't expect the Republican Party to pick Ted Cruz if they're going to do a contested convention and not give it to the guy who gets the majority of the delegates, or the plurality of delegates. I don't think that they would replace him with Ted Cruz, another guy that they can't stand. They might, but I don't think that's the direction they would go if that's what they're going to do. I think that Ted Cruz, if he wants to be the nominee, he has to win it outright, and that's pretty unlikely, but this was a step in the right direction for him to get a 30-point advantage, or a 30-delegate advantage in Wisconsin over Donald Trump was exactly what he needed to do. he won by a larger margin than I think anyone really expected him to do. As I said in my video my preview of this race, Wisconsin doesn't really seem like a Ted Cruz state, so it's a little surprising. So, who knows what that means going forward. It doesn't mean that he's going to win New York. Donald Trump is way, way ahead in New York, and he's as close to a sure thing to win New York by a lot. And that's a very big state. He's going to get a massive delegate lead in New York. So certainly Donald Trump still has the advantage, but obviously he would have liked to have done better in Wisconsin. He did worse than the polls indicated, and he lost by double digits in Wisconsin, which he should have been able to win that state, and he didn't. So there should be concern in the Trump campaign, mainly that Cruz is going to keep him from outright getting the nomination, which could definitely lead to him not getting it at all, because of contested convention, they wouldn't be likely to give it to Trump based on what they've said in the past. But that's the main thing about it. I don't think it means that Cruz is likely to outright get the nomination, because he's still pretty far behind. And then really, like I said, when you consider New York and the position that he's in New York, he has no chance of winning New York, and he kind of would need to or at least, if he doesn't win New York, he'd have to win California, which he's also very unlikely to do. So, although that is about 2 months off, so that could still change, but I don't really expect that to happen. So yeah, on the Republican side, Cruz is catching up. He's making it more likely they'll get a contested convention, which is pretty much what he's hoping for. It does make it more likely, if he's going to have a chance to outright win the nomination, this is exactly what he needed to do in Wisconsin. So it's a very good thing for Ted Cruz and his campaign. On the other side, on the Democratic side, again, doesn't really make a huge shift, but Bernie Sanders has won 7 of the last 8 contests. And that's pretty big. He's clearly got momentum. Wisconsin was never really a huge Hillary state. He was competitive for a while in Wisconsin. It's not like it just came out of nowhere and that he recently took the lead. You look at the states coming up, and you've got states like, especially New York. Well, the next state you've got Wisconsin, or not, we just had Wisconsin, my bad. Wyoming. All these W states, I get confused a little bit. I had Washington recently, Wisconsin, Wyoming. But they have a caucus, a closed caucus. Closed doesn't really help Bernie Sanders, but caucuses really help Bernie Sanders. He has a major advantage in caucus states. He's doing better in the little bit of polling that they have of Wyoming, and I'll do a thing about that when that comes up later this week. So, yeah, he should definitely win Wyoming. Probably it'll be a similar win to the recent caucus states that we had, similar to a state like Alaska. That's kind of what I'm expecting. A really small state, really low vote, small amount of voters, low amount of delegates, but should win by a large margin. So, and then we get to more important states, to be honest. No offense to Wyoming, but it's not going to make a huge difference. New York is the big state coming up on both sides, although on the Republican side it's not really too contentious. Donald Trump is almost certainly going to win. On the Democratic side, it is more contentious, even though there was a poll, and I'll talk about this when we get closer to New York. I'll show the poll that had Hillary Clinton with a 48-point lead in New York in the middle of March. And to put that into context, there was another poll from the end of last May, almost a year ago, that had Bernie down by 40%, 55 to 15. This poll from last month said that he was down 71 to 23. So that was honestly maybe the worst poll I have ever seen in my life. It was so clearly wrong. If you look at the 2 polls before that one, Bernie Sanders was down by 21%. And you look at the 2 polls since then, he was down by, in the most recent poll, he was down by 10. And the one before that, he was down by 12. So it averages, about 15 to 20 that he's been down over the last month. And then this one just randomly has him down 48. So obviously it's going to be much more competitive than that. That was a horrible poll. I don't know if they're just completely incompetent or what. That was such a terrible job they did on that poll. But it's closer, but it's a close primary that Hillary Clinton does have the advantage in as of now. So we'll see how that goes over the next 2 weeks going into New York. It's going to be much closer than on the Republican side, where Donald Trump should win easily. Hillary Clinton is probably not going to win easily. Right now, she definitely seems to have the advantage in New York, but Bernie Sanders is closing in. So we'll see how that goes, and that's going to be more important than this Wisconsin race. Although the Wisconsin race did have a certain level of importance, it's larger than states like Wyoming or Alaska or states like that. But it's also, a 10 delegate difference. It's not going to shift the race, but the momentum is clearly in Bernie Sanders' favor. So, I guess we're going to see how that plays out going forward, and I'm definitely interested to see how things turn out in New York on the Democratic side, and if this has any major impact on the Republican side, this win for Ted Cruz. So obviously it's a win for Cruz, it's a win for Sanders. Again, as I've said in previous elections, not going to dramatically shift the race. This one primary is not going to dramatically shift the race, but it does give an advantage. It does certainly help the Cruz and Sanders campaigns. So I guess I'll give myself a little bit of credit here and say I think that I did a pretty good job in my predictions and my preview of both sides of the election. I wasn't exactly right in my predictions, but I did get both of the candidates that I thought would win right, and I got it pretty close actually in the percentages I thought that they would win by. Neither of them were exact, but I think I got pretty close. There were people that I saw that were actually predicting Trump and Hillary, both of them, to win in Wisconsin. So I think that I actually did a pretty good job on my predictions for this one. I was mostly right, just not trying to give myself too much credit or anything, but I do think that I did a good job on this one. So that's basically my take on the Wisconsin primary on both the Democratic and Republican side. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.